Can't wait to get into this conversation today. So, you are familiar with my mission, and I am familiar with your mission, which is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation today.
Yes.
I think we are redefining what online and IRL means. We
Mhm.
have to bridge the gap together. And I know that is so much a part of your mission and your legacy within the entertainment and tech industries.
Yes.
So I would love for you to share a bit about your story so that anybody listening can understand your background and be inspired as much as I have been.
Oh my goodness. Well, one, Kaylee, thank you so much for having me. It's always so interesting when people ask about my story because I'm like, where do I start? Like, this is like, I would just say, okay, if I could really go back to where this started and trying to summarize it, but to provide, in honor of our president existing in the context, I would say that I've always been like a creative person. I think even like growing up, like English was like my favorite class because we were learning like the art of story. And I think like being told that you're a storyteller from like a very early age, like sometimes it just doesn't resonate. But having parents that were both like entertainment executives, specifically in the music industry, that understood the creativity aspect of like culture and storytelling and like resonating with community, but then also understanding like economics and business and like blending those two worlds have always been ingrained in my life and just in my psyche. And I think knowing that I was a creative person, but not necessarily knowing in what way at first, because I don't have the best singing voice, honestly, and I didn't see myself at the time as like a writer or anything. So it was just kind of like I was always just shadowing, like I was always observing like the entertainment industry, which I think kind of gave me this like very unique dual perspective of like seeing the entertainment industry from like the lens of my parents or like my family members that had already been in it versus seeing it as someone who was coming up into it and seeing how people my age or my peers were interacting with it. And after getting my degree in entertainment business and working at record labels and things like that, I was introduced to the tech world through like Web3 and the metaverse. And as someone who played The Sims a lot growing up, I felt like that was like making that virtual world a tangible thing in like the real world, no pun intended to online and IRL. So it was just kind of like an immersive experience for me, honestly, of seeing like, oh, like the tech space like actually wants to like funnel in the entertainment space, but when you look at like historical context, like entertainment has always been built off of like the building blocks of technology. So it was
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like that light bulb epiphany of like, oh, like it's literally entertainment and technology converging, but for some reason, like we as a society have always like deemed them as separate for some reason. And so just noticing those patterns, like I had coined the term EnterTech, and with my business hat, I trademarked it, of course. So it was just like you see biotech, you see fintech, ed tech, ad tech, it's all these techs, but there was no EnterTech. And I felt like entertainment creators, storytellers, artists, like we deserve to be a part of the conversation because we actually add so much value to the world. So that's the summary of how I got into it.
I love that. And I'm so glad that you segued into EnterTech.
Mm-hmm.
When I first heard about you and what, your story and what you're pushing forward within EnterTech,
Mm-hmm.
coming from the MarTech world, coming from like multiple different tech worlds, I thought it was brilliant to call that out, especially coming from the perspective that I have, which is around growth strategy for companies, how you can really build sustainable companies, which I believe is by engaging customers and creating an entertaining experience for them. So I really want to get into the creator perspective. And I think even before that, to set the landscape, I first want to talk about the tech industry. Why do you think the tech industry is disconnected from the entertainment industry? What's the block there?
I have a lot of theories on why the tech industry is the way that it is. I think, I mean, technology is it's such a powerful tool, and I'm not even just talking about like today's technology. I mean, because looking back again historically, technology at one point was a hammer, of just like something that could be utilized to like advance humanity. And so I think the tech industry has people that have intentions of advancing humanity, but I think what they tend to forget is humanity's legacy of storytelling before technology was even a thing. And I think, that's really where the disconnect is. And it's so funny because I think we talked about this before, where I feel like from the tech world, they look at the entertainment industry from a business model perspective of like, this business model actually doesn't make sense. And there's like technology now that can like solve that issue from like a logical perspective, like an economic perspective, which is like yes, but what they don't realize and what a lot of people that currently work within the entertainment space understand is that entertainment is a people business. Like it is a humane business, and sometimes people in entertainment tend to forget that too, but it's like it is a humane business. It is about psychology, it is about connection and community as well, because that is what entertainment does. Like it bridges people together. And so I think you kind of have to have a blend. So it's so funny how like both parties can see how they enhance the other, but they don't really see what the other has to enhance its current industry. So it's a really weird take, but yeah, I think the tech industry, like, they just need more people that are not in tech. Like, I think it's, yeah, like, it's weird, but I think that's what it is. Because when you have a lot of engineers, and I think it's also like brain processing, right? Like, everyone's brains are different. And so when you have an industry that it's really built on like engineering and like logical processing and data and like things that are tangible, it's like that's super helpful. But you also need like the creativity and like innovation from like creators and artists and storytellers to be like, how can this tech be utilized? And I used to say this a lot to some of my clients that were in the tech space, like, you can raise all the money in the world, you can have all the funding in the world, but if no one is using your product, and hopefully I can cuss just a little bit, no one will
Yes.
give a fuck. Like,
Yeah.
no one care. Like, if no one is using your product, it does not matter if you have $10 million in the bank. That 10 million is going to be wasted because no one's
Mm-hmm.
using it, and you're not even going to be able to flip it and make more money. So I do think that the tech industry just has to not be so focused on like replacing humanity or like replacing like human instincts with like unnecessary logical stuff, when it's like we should just be like focused on the convergence of the two, in my opinion at least.
Right. And one of the things that I think that you called out that is at the root of it is trust.
Yeah.
Tech companies want to launch their product to humans to quote unquote make their life better, help them be more successful in their positions, and help them be more successful in their businesses.
Yeah.
But especially now where we're at with technology in the current digital landscape, the technology that is being rolled out is something that people are more skeptical about,
Yeah.
are trying to figure out how to trust it or not. And especially within our digital landscape, we have a history of things coming at us and us finding out later that our data was exposed.
Yeah.
The algorithms were manipulating us, big tech companies were taking advantage in ways that we did not consent to. That's just the reality of our digital experience. Whether people, take that information in and change their behavior or not is up to them. We've just all heard those things in the news. And one of the things that time and time again that humans do is create trust with each other through community. And I think creatives play a very special role in that with their storytelling abilities. And right now, with this AI revolution coming out of the information age, it's going to completely transform, and it's already happening and influencing a creative revolution between how people show up online, especially because there's more people becoming content creators than ever. There's more pressure, I think, to have an online presence than ever.
Yes.
And one of the things that you do so well is speak to those new wave creatives, whether they have been creating their whole lifetime and building up specific skills, say in animation. You speak to where they're at now and help them navigate for the future. So what are some of the shifts that you've seen in the creative landscape, especially as it comes to new technology, and how can creators be prepared for the current stage we're in and in the future?
Oh my god.
And I know you'll go off on this, so
I know.
Go ahead.
I'm ready. Like, I've been waiting for this question. I mean, honestly, Kaylee, I will say, like, one thing that I've noticed is like a stronger desire, even though I feel like the desire was always there, but a stronger desire slash a a lot more outspoken approach of speaking about creative sovereignty. And I
Mm,
think that now that being independent doesn't, or being independent and successful, or like being a creative entrepreneur and successful actually isn't like a long-winded thing. Like I think it's becoming a lot more feasible and a lot more realistic for creators. I think a lot of them are shifting their approach to being, oh well that's not thing, or that can't be my story, to okay well how could I do that, you know, and asking more so, instead of shutting the what down, being open to the how. And I think that's something that I'm really excited about personally, because I think that's really, at least from my perspective, that's the only thing that can block creators from like reaching their goal, is like their own mentality and their own open-mindedness. And I say this all the time, like, because you know I'm a history buff, so you know I'm like such a history nerd, but it's like we have so much accessible to us now, yet we struggle doing more. Whereas like the people that we look up to historically, or just, you know, whoever, whether creators, tech moguls, business owners, whatever, we're able to do more with less. But now we have more and we're doing less. And I think it should be the opposite. I think we should be utilizing every tool that we have at our disposal, especially as it's still available either for free or for like a shorter price. Like I just think that there's so many ways. So that's the first part of your question. Can you ask me the second part of your question, please? I'm sorry.
oh no, I think I just got enthralled in your answer. But to the second part of my question is, how can creators position themselves differently moving forward? Or
Mm-hmm.
I guess like, what tips would you give creators to build up their mentality? And
Oh my God.
the bullet point that I would add there is, I've heard you speak about the power of intellectual property and
Yes.
creators understanding how valuable their ideas are, how
Yeah.
valuable their unique perspective is, and how
Mm-hmm.
valuable their unique art is and approach to storytelling
Yeah.
or engaging people. So, would love to hear your tips on mentality for creators, and
Mm-hmm.
what advice would you give to people who are understanding like the power of those ideas that they have?
Oh my gosh. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think the first thing that I would say in terms of mentality, and this is something that I've also had to ask myself plenty of times to even get to the point where I am, is like, if money wasn't an issue, what would you be doing? You know, and I think that's like a really big thing for a lot of creators, because things, you know, the saying like, to make money you need to spend money, like, and a lot of creators unfortunately don't have it, or they think that they don't have it, or they think that they actually need a lot more than what they do. And so I like to always pose the question to them, because I could ask someone like, well, what do you want to do? And they can say, oh, I want to have my own studio, but I don't have money, or I don't. And that's why I always pose the question, well, if money was an issue, what would you do? You know, like, put yourself in that position of not being in a state of survival, and ask yourself not only how does that feel, but once you're no longer in a state of survival, what would you actually do with yourself and your creativity? Because sometimes, you know, people deem creativity as a means of a way out, or like they're going to use their skill set to, you know, get out of a position that, or a livelihood, or just maybe they're living at a parent's house so they don't necessarily want to, you know, like there's so many different components that add into like a creative's experience and what drives them to create. But I think that's the first thing on a mentality shift. Like, if money wasn't an issue, or lack of money wasn't an issue, what would you be doing with your creativity? I think that does lead into the intellectual property conversation, because most times, I would say like a good like 75% of the times, they always answer the question of expanding upon what they already have. So if it's a music artist and I ask them, well, if money wasn't an issue, what would you do? They always say like a fashion line. They always say, I want to get into short films, like, or I want to have my own studio, or like I want to do a school. Like, it's always an extension, as if like their piece of art is just kind of like an entry point, or like a funnel into something much bigger for themselves. And so I think when it comes into intellectual property, and I know like, and I mentioned this in my little reel and my Instagram video, like I know it can sound really boring, but that's probably one of the most powerful things that any creative, any artist should really be paying attention to. You know, I think like I'm not the biggest person on like the law, even though like I do enjoy reading contracts, because businesses speak in legalese, you know, and I think like we talk about whether it's governments or businesses or like any multi-billion millionaire, whatever, like they have attorneys and they have assets. And so I think what really shifted for me and what I would want any creator or artist to know is that your intellectual property, your ideas are legitimate assets. And I think because sometimes when we talk about assets, it's like, oh, is it land? Is it stock? Is it whatever? But, going back to the question of mentality thing, but to also add to that point, it's like if you look around you, everything around you was once an idea. And someone was able to add an intellectual property component so they can monetize their idea. And that's really what creatives and artists and storytellers should really be focusing on, is how do I monetize my ideas? Because a big thing, at least in the current entertainment model, it's like it's really hard for them to monetize their ideas, not because they're not valuable, but because most times they're not owning their IP. And I think that is like the disconnect. And when I was able to really crack that, I was like, oh, like that's really, and of course it's a lot more details when we get into IP and is it trademark, is it copyright, and that type of things. But when you start realizing that there are so many resources, even at the trademark office in the United States, at least, because I can't speak globally yet, but at least in the US, like what they offer and like so many resources and ways in which you can protect yourself, like that's why, at least on the music side as well, like when you hear about artists owning their masters, that's IP, those are their IP rights. And like it's like creative rights, really. And it's like that is something that I never realized, that having a sheet of paper saying I have the trademark or having a copyright was equivalent to like having a big piece of land or like a building or like a real estate building that I could then license out to people or like really create wealth. And I think that's something that I really want to stress for a lot of just like storytellers and creators and artists, and like not even just from like a musical, but like marketers or artists, like executives or storytellers to a certain extent. Like it's understanding that IP is the key to creative wealth generation. That's I think that is like the biggest thing, and that's something that I have to continuously stress over and over again.
Right. I think it's really interesting. I love this conversation, and hearing you speak about this caused a big shift in me as an entrepreneur and as a creative and as somebody who started to see all of these things that I wanted to create as internet art. Because I think often for a creator, and even taking a step back for that to the artist persona, the art you create is so based off of your human experience. And the content you create as a digital creator is based off of your human experience. And we've seen people do that and create those paths forward in that way. But the challenge with that is that you are so integrated into that art and into that content. And that is both a beautiful thing, but also something that adds this pressure to both yourself to live your life and then create, and also pressure in how that art and that content is perceived and experienced. And especially in this world where we are able to have success metrics and see other people be successful, or at least tell stories about how they are successful, there's always this contrast in how we're pouring into our work and the experiences we're creating, how that's so inherent to us as a person and how we impact other people. And I think that this is true for a creator mindset and an entrepreneurship mindset, and why the IP conversation is a great bridge is that at some point, what you are creating and the experience you're creating, yes, that's integrated into who you are, but success is not based off of who you are. Art and related to who you are, nobody else can deem if that's successful or not. Now, if you're trying to create like a monetized career off of that, that is going to have a transaction of value. And as with any artist, creator, or entrepreneur, when there's a monetary transaction, you want to be as aligned as possible, but the market you're entering may not have that. And I've struggled with this within my own entrepreneurial journey, anybody has, trying to consistently align to your purpose and stay grounded in your facts. How can you expect ultimate success in fundraising if the industry conversion rate is 3% and you've only pitched so many people, and so you don't have a good basis on what that conversion rate should be.
Exactly.
I think especially when you're so tied to, and so integrated in your art and so tied to the success of it and how you want other people to succeed within it, the constructs of the society we live in and the market we live in can provide such a contrast that really slows people down and discourages them from continuing. And we can't let that happen. Yes, there are things within society and our market and our systems that are happening right now that are barriers to people, but there's also innovation, as you speak to. There's connections that we can make, and there's connections that we can make to each other to stand in solidarity to push back on those systems, and to also keep us grounded in what we do have within our toolkit for, as a marketing speak, to be able to push forward in that. And I would love for you to share a bit more about some of your recent content on your YouTube channel about, why creators should create their own network, why they should create their own path, especially if they are facing the struggle of trying to connect the dots between monetization, being visible in the industry, gaining recognition online and social media. At some point, the, again, system that we're trying to participate in can only go so far with the time that we're trading and the time that we want to invest in our art. So what happens if the barrier that we perceive, we just overcome it ourselves? So I would love to hear more about that.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought this up. There's so many points that I want to hit on, and I think that gosh, I mean, one, I would say just speaking from the entertainment side, right? When we talk about music, TV and film, gaming, experiential events, community building, fashion, merchandise, just all those different types of experiences. I think that, again, we kind of need to go back to the future a little bit and reference the historical context in what we're operating in, because I think when we talk about movies or video games or music or even just content itself, TV shows, the ways in which those things used to be created and consumed 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, there was such a high value on entertainment because it was not democratized. There was a limited amount of people that had access to the technology to create that, right? And they also had the means to distribute it on a mass level. When you now have a shift in power, no pun intended, but a shift in power in terms of audiences are also now becoming a lot more sophisticated. They're not just willing to accept whatever content that is given to them. Audiences are becoming a lot more intentional, but then you also now have resources to kind of create your own distribution. Those were the two highest commodities I feel in entertainment, was distribution and reaching all these people, as well as the creative tools that you needed to even create the art that you wanted to distribute in the first place. Now, again, of course, a streaming service or a record label or a network or a studio lot obviously still has those really high-end expensive resources, but when you look at from a business model perspective, please don't come for me, executives, please. Hire me, actually, instead. I think that it's a level of, they're trying to move in the future by doing an old way of doing things. And I just don't think that that's accurate, whereas a lot of creators, I hate to bring them up, but the Zeus Network, they are considered a reality TV darling right now, and are making multi-million dollars a month, and are considered I hate to say it, but an EnterTech platform to a certain extent. They were able to create a network by themselves with no major Hollywood backing, and have scaled into a multi-million, if not the billion maybe be a stretch, but a multi-million dollar company, by creating their own in-house content, by distributing it themselves. And respectfully, the shows have no storyline. So it's there's no sophistication to what they're creating, yet they're able to make millions of dollars. So to me, it's if they can do it, why can't the creator that is putting so much intentionality into their work not do the same thing? And I think that's why I made those YouTube videos. One, for my own experience of, you know, creating my own interactive network last year, as an EnterTech case study within itself, of like, if I was to put out an episode for my TV show IP, the Zodiac Games, that was interactive, what would be the watch time? Would people vote? Would people watch? Would people be willing to pay to watch the content that I produce? And they hit every mark. They watched it. They watched an hour watch time. They voted. They were invested. Like, people showed up to auditions. Companies partnered with us to put the auditions. So shout out to Partyful for that. So it's like, when you start realizing that, like, oh, like, I shouldn't, like, because again, just using myself as an example, the first time we tried to do the Zodiac Games, I tried to shop the content. You know, I tried to sell the show. Like, I tried to shop my treatment, my little virtual pilot to some streaming services. I won't say any names. Like, making a fake little assistant to reach out on their behalf so they felt like they were talking to somebody more higher up when I was like 20, still in college at the time. Like, and although I got those meetings, it was a no. And I thank God for that, because it's like, now I own that IP. Like, if I would have sold it, yeah, I could have gotten like a check, but they probably would have taken it, done something half-assed, and then it would never really been able to scale in the ways in which it's scaling and turning into now. And so I think that, you know, with that being said though, I want artists and creators to know that when you make that decision to be your own funnel and your own conduit for your own reality and what you're creating for yourself, you cannot just be focused on the art though. And I think that's the disconnect that they struggle with a lot. Like, because as an artist, you're so perfectionist with like the story you want to tell with your art, whether it's through music, whether it's a short film, animation, video game, clothing, but you now need to put your business cap on, because Houston Howard, shout out to Houston, he made this analogy in this video that he was talking about in regards to, it's like someone wanting to create a pizza business using their mom's recipe. Like, you could have the recipe down pat, it could be the best pizza in the world, and it's like a family recipe, you make it for all your friends, and you know it would be a fire ass pizza shop business. But once you get to the pizza shop, you gotta know customer service, you gotta know branding, what are the deals, what types of pizzas are you doing, what time do you guys close, what is the training for, like, there's so many other components that you have to learn when you are being self-sufficient. And it's not just you operating as like an employee anymore. It's really, you are the boss. Like, everybody wants to be the boss until it's time to really be the boss. And it's like, I think that's what I want to just empower creators to know. Like, there are so many resources at your disposal, so don't feel like you have to figure it out on your own, but do understand that if that is the ways in which you want to go about it, like, you really are the boss of your own reality. So it requires a behavioral adjustment.
Mm-hmm. I think as well, being able to separate or have that like entrepreneurial mindset, see yourself as the boss and like the owner and manager of that IP, even though there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, I think that there is a path forward to actually create more sustainability for the artist, to long-term create more time, to create more impact.
Yes.
And us as content consumers and internet users, there are things that we know and we have consumed and that we have watched be successful. And at some point, what you need to do, and you know I love this especially, you need to take and leave all of those things that you learned to figure out a path forward that's custom to you within a strategy to make sure that you can reach those goals and be creating impact while also advocating for yourself. Because I think that if we look at applying that business mindset, looking at your own funnel, understanding how you are building and creating relationships, at the end of the day, that is self-advocacy within this industry.
Right.
Now, I would love to talk about the ETA, the EnterTech agency, your services that you offer there, and I would love to then ask you a question after that from the entertainment or EnterTech perspective. We talked about Zeus as a network. If you were advising Zeus, if you were consulting to Zeus, what would you say? So first, let's talk about the agency.
Yes, oh my gosh. Well, the EnterTech agency I feel like is a long time coming. ETA is a labor of love, passion, and just brain power. And we really are focused on just preserving humanity's legacy of storytelling as technology advances. And so I think, I'm not anti AI, but I'm not anti AI replacing humans. Like I'm not pro anti replacing humans. I'm actually more so about like, okay, again, historical context. Like there were silent movies, then there was recorded music, and that technology helped propel like entertainment and storytelling to reach more people. And I think we're in a similar, not that downplayed, but it's still very monumental in like the transition that we're in right now, but very similar in terms of we should be embracing the immersing technologies and figure out, okay, with all of this, how do we tell stories differently but more effective? And I think that's why a lot of bigger companies or conglomerates or corporations that have been able to make a fortune off of the old way of doing things are struggling now because they're struggling with adjusting their business model. And so especially with technology, and it's like they want to use immersing technology to replace and cut down on human costs, but it's not effective. You still need humans. Like that's just one of those things, right? And so I think with ETA, what we're really focused on is supporting brands, media companies, tech companies, and as well as creators to tell their stories differently. I think when you think of every person in the planet, whether you agree with them or not, race, age, creed, background, whatever, like everyone has a story that either they want to tell or that they have. And I think especially when you have brands or you are a creative company, you have your brand story, but then there might be a rollout that you're doing and you're trying to reach certain people. So the services that ETA offer is actually in a 3-tiered approach. So go to market, so whether that's like marketing campaigns, brand partnerships, experiential IRL events, because we know that post-COVID and in a post-COVID society, people actually really desire that closeness. With each other. The second is our EnterTech studio, which is basically our IP portfolio and management. So I have a lot of music manager friends who do and bust their ass and just do so much. And I always used to tell them I would never be a manager. Like it's just a thankless industry, it's a thankless job, and I just could never do it. But as the agency was developing, I was like, I don't really want to manage people. Like I kind of want to just manage the IP, like I think that's really important. And I think a lot of ideas need that same amount of nurturing. I think sometimes when you're managing people, you get caught up in the people's ego and not the project or the message itself. And I really wanted to flip it on its head. And I think as someone who's just a passionate person about interactive story and like immersion, like I just thought that, it would be really cool. So our EnterTech studio provides those services for different IPs that are really built to be like EnterTech franchises and brands and consumer brands that just so happen to start as entertainment pieces. And then our third is our new worlds category, which I'm really excited because I don't really see a lot of agencies do this, but it's crazy because I was already doing it, which is AI experimentation, because a lot of tech platforms and tech startups, they have this great platform where they have these really long white papers for these like creator tools, and they may pay like an ambassador or whatever, like, but it's not like from real community building, and they're not really beta testing within the market that they say that they want to reach. And so we really want to give tech platforms an opportunity to get real-time market feedback, and just understanding like what creators and what their target market actually thinks about their product to ensure that they can make the best product that they can, but then also creators getting accessibility to these new tools to actually figure out and get real-time like experience and hands-on experience on how to use it in real time. And also just focusing on like Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and retaining their attention, and I think that's something that I've realized a lot as a Gen Z executive, again, like having peers, being on the consumer side, but then being usually the youngest person in the room talking to these executives. Like we as Gen Z, like we're actually very sophisticated, can always tell when we're being sold to, and that's something that I'm really big on. Like I don't really think that, at least with ETA, like we're focused on selling a story. Like we're actually more so focused on like reaching people where they're at and like aligning story with the values to make them feel emotionally connected, because that's really what Gen Z and Gen Alpha really care about. It's about something that reaches to them versus a quick little gimmick, because shout out to the Democratic ticket, but it's like once the older generation started picking up on, it's a brat summer, it was already played out. Like it was already out of it. Like I was already done. So I think, not doing it in a cringy way, but doing it with taste, making it cool still, and knowing that like we can tell stories and integrate technology in a way that's innovative, that's fun, that's experimental, but like still gets the job done. Without making creators or humans feel like they're useless, which should never be the case. And so I'm really excited about ETA. I think it's a long time coming. I think all of my former projects have kind of sharpened me for like this umbrella of what ETA is and what it's developing into. And so I'm grateful for you, of course, and your wisdom and your guidance and your insight. And I'm just excited. Like it feels like a breath of fresh air. And I think like the world needs it, I need it. And I think that again, like I realized that although I've went to school for entertainment business and like all of these things, the most important thing more than anything is that I've realized that I'm in the business of story, and that's what matters. And ETA is
Right.
focused on that.
Right. I love that. I think all of the services that you've created through your agency are just spot on. And what I really love about it is that it not only serves like one persona, it serves everybody who is involved in this specific challenge within the community, and also the disconnects that exist and
Yeah,
building connection between what can make it better, which, as you know, is a big value of mine.
absolutely.
So I want to feature, next, like how brands and creators can work with you, what their next steps are. But I would love to, like, if you could give one piece of advice to Zeus Network and
Uh-huh.
even tech companies or tech platforms that might be watching this, what's
Yeah.
the one thing that you would tell them to consider today
Oh
in
my
their
gosh,
work?
if I could give the Zeus Network advice from like an ETA agency perspective, um, and also slash as a Black woman, I don't necessarily, I know it's a key, I know it's a play on Bad Girls Club, I know it. If I was the Zeus Network, honestly, what I would do is I would transition their platform from just like baddies and fighting to a WWE wrestling, boxing type of platform. Because I think celebrities, and especially influencers from that like social media caliber, they feud, like the girls be fighting. And I feel like if you're going to promote, like if that's like the ratings that you're getting from like fighting and stuff like that, it's like whatever. Like you built your brand off that. That's something that you have to stay consistent with because that's what people go to the Zeus Network for, right? However, I think that there should be a little more class, a little more taste, a little more mindfulness, a little bit more cutesy, a little more demure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if they could have, and if they can reposition it, even if it's like a limited edition series of like boxing, but like women boxing or like influencers, and then people could bet on who wins because that's a whole other monetary stream. Do it that way. Like you would still keep the engagement. It's still consistent with the branding of Zeus. It's still the little influencers. They're already boxing anyways, but like make it a moment, and like make it a performance. Have somebody perform at the damn boxing match. Like do it that way and make it like a real cultural moment. Even though I know that would still be controversial, but like do it with a little more intentionality, versus like just having a bunch of people filming like strangers in a house like drunk fighting. Like I just think that there's a way to go about telling a story. Like if people are feuding, make it a moment and like have that investment from consumers from that lens. So yeah, guys, hire me, let me, give me a call. But on that end, I would say yeah. But I think as tech companies though, because I don't really watch Zeus like that, but I get like the clips. But for tech companies, I think it's really important for like them to understand who their product is for, and not from like a white paper standpoint of like, oh, here are the psychographics, like here are the demographics, but like literally who is the product for though. And like go into those communities and like get in the field, like be on the grounds, like as having parents that were in the record labels in the 90s and early 2000s. They had street teams, they had the college kids, going to parties, giving out flyers, like being on the ground. And I feel like tech companies don't do that. Like they don't have people on the ground. And I think that's something that they miss when it comes to connecting with consumers, especially those specifically that are building creator tools. Like, I can't really speak on like the software developments and things like that, but especially from like an entertainment artsy like creator side of things, if you were able to create, and inspired by you actually, if tech platforms were able to have creator programs and even like having creator chapters like at different colleges and having like college students like share their feedback with their products, I think that would just be so invaluable to them and what they're building. And also again, like allowing young people to like connect. And I think that's why like even with like children's entertainment, like when we think about like Nickelodeon or like Disney, and like now all these kids that have grown up are like going back to old things because they were introduced to these like products and these stories when they were really really young, and that people hold on to that. And so I think if you meet people where they're at and like get in the field and not stay in Silicon Valley or your offices, and you like actually meet people where they're at, you'll have a better time going to market because people are already familiar with like your product and or have heard of it and feel like you're human. Like I think
Yeah.
that's my tip for, you know, tech platforms. And again, give me an ETA call.
I think what you called on there, which as we've talked about, I believe every brand should have a creators program,
Yes.
nonprofits across any industry. I really believe that a huge focus when you build community should be uplifting your customers.
Yeah.
And when you are engaging them as creators or whatever it may be, you can look at the story you're telling and the impact you're creating more than just a product exchange, but as a platform. And we talk about platforms in today's day and age, social media platforms, etc. But what does it mean to make your brand a platform by literally elevating the people who you touch, the people who you
Right.
work with, the people you serve? I think part of your platform, as you mentioned to me before, you're doing a resource radar content series to help
Hmm.
connect creators and these tech companies who are creating novel tools to each other.
Yes.
So, as we wind down now, we have about like, a few 8 minutes left or so. I would love to
Mhm.
hear about that series and then how brands and creators can find you and follow you.
Oh my gosh. Well, one, I'm really excited about this series and thank you for bringing it up because, as you know, it was a download. And I'm very excited about it because I think it really is uh, a clear expression of how my brain functions when I like am on the internet and I'm finding these tools, because in the back of my mind I'm always like, oh, like this creator could use this for this and they could use it for this, and vice versa. You know, when I'm talking to creators, I'm always like, well, have you heard about this platform, or like, do you know about this? And so I think just kind of being able to act as a real life conduit and being a bridge between those two worlds, I'm really excited about. Also, as someone who just likes playing on the computer, like I just like finding new tools that I think would be really helpful and resourceful. And I think that people, I'm surprised that there isn't something like that already. And I think that when I was doing it a little bit more consistently last year, if people found it very like useful and valuable. And then, you know, of course, like I got caught up in the content creator algorithm. Oh, I have to do, and I felt like I kind of just lost. I don't want to say the purpose, but I feel like I just got caught up in the ideological pressure of consistency versus like the intentionality of why I'm doing Resource Radar. And so I'm really
Mm-hmm.
excited to go back into it from a lens of intentionality and not just being like, oh, here's this cool AI tool. Because some of the AI tools that I brought up last year, I honestly were just finding them and they're not even like existing today. So
Mm.
like really honing in on tools that are not just accessible now, but like ethical tools. And we learned that lesson from earlier this year, and just making sure that like both worlds have a means to connect with each other, because that really is the only way for both parties to move forward, especially as tech companies and platforms and media companies and brands want to continue to grow. Of course, they want to stay sustainable, but they also know that if they have no one consuming their work or using their product, like they're gonna go out of business. But then creators, like especially like the animation community as well, like we're one of the main people and groups of people within the entertainment and creative space that kept lights on at a lot of these studios, and they're now majority of them are like out of work, and you know, but yet there's so many creator tools that they could utilize to do it themselves, and they just don't know that exists. So for me to kind of find those tools to like match it with certain creators, like I'm just very honored to put it together, and I'm really excited for Resource Radar. And for people to find me, it's my personal social media is at Gen Z Exec on all platforms. That's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and X. And then EnterTech slash ETA's new Instagram just uh, became on the scene, and it's at entertech.world on Instagram. And if those are interested in working with me, you can email me at that's SI, at entertech.world.
And you have a broadcast channel, which I
Oh,
really love the messages, called Sears.
yes.
And as we wind down, can you tell us the background of that name? Why did you name your broadcast channel Sears?
Yes. So I'm glad you asked this question. Sears is actually a triple entendre.
Yeah, not one, not two, three.
Yes, it's a triple entendre. So the first one is, I mean, my nickname is C slash Sierra. So it was just kind of like, oh, like playing on like the people that are like really invested in my messaging, because you know you can have people that follow you on Instagram, but those that are like, no, like I want updates. So to me, I was like, okay, these are the people that really resonate with what I'm talking about. And then as time became on, and you know EnterTech became a thing, I was like, oh, like these are people who like resonate with my message, but those who resonate with my message and what I talk about have a gift of foresight, and have the ability to see something that other people's may not be paying attention to. And so that's where the second entendre comes in. And then the third is, as an astro girly and someone who is just very connected with the earth and nature and the metaphysical, seers are actually very magical people. And I think that as storytellers, we are also magical people. And you know, you always, there's like these quotes that you hear about people who control the media, control the mind, and all of these things, but there is some truth to it, you know. And I do think that creators and storytellers and artists, like, we do have the ability to alchemize. And I think a lot of creators may not really understand that, but it's like you're literally taking something from your mind and making it tangible. Like you're taking something from an intangible form into something that the world can experience, and that is literal magic. So I think it is a triple entendre of playing on like the power and the value that creators and artists and storytellers really have, but then also utilizing it of like, we have this power, but like how do we use the technology and tools of today to enhance that and expand on it and really make this something sustainable.
Wow, that's a beautiful thing. And I love your explanation of it. And I love that you called out that storytelling is magic. The
Yes.
experiences that you create for people and the way that you make them feel is magic, that influence. And when we recognize that influence we have, and in my like personal beliefs, the responsibility we have to bring that
Mm-hmm.
to life, to bring those unique to bring those unique gifts to life, what can happen when we use what we have out there today to do so.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Sierra, for this interview. I loved everything that you said. And so everybody who is watching this, definitely follow Sierra, reach out to her if you have questions about her work. Definitely take a look at her agency services and comment below wherever we are. I just really appreciate you, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I hope I can come back once, you know, we have some trailers coming out on the IP side,
Oh,
and
yeah.
to talk about also how story is a great means of social and political commentary.
Yeah. Love that. To be continued.
Yes. And thank you, Kaylee, so much for having me. I adore you and I adore this platform, and I'm so excited for you.
Thank you.